The three pale moons of Thalassa Prime cast their ethereal glow across the vast oceans that covered 95% of the planet's surface. Beneath the gentle waves, bioluminescent coral forests stretched for miles, their soft blue and purple hues painting the underwater landscape in a perpetual twilight dream. Floating cities, constructed of living coral and sustainable biomaterials, dotted the surface like jewels, each one connected by translucent bridges that seemed to capture and amplify the moonlight. In the research dome of Azure Reach, the largest of these floating metropolises, Dr. Mara Kintari stood before a wall of holographic displays, her dark eyes reflecting the data streams that scrolled endlessly across them. Behind her, a team of 4 researchers, 2 human, 2 Thalassan, worked in companionable silence. The only sounds the occasional soft chime of instruments and the eternal, soothing pulse of the waves against the dome's outer shell. "Another perfect harmony reading from the eastern reefs," announced Ilara, a junior xenobiologist from Earth Colony 7. Her pale fingers danced across a biocomputer interface, leaving trails of light in their wake. 6th consecutive month without disruption. Mara nodded, satisfaction warming her features. After 5 years on Thalassa Prime, she had grown to love this world almost as much as the natives did. As first contact specialist and head xenobiologist for the Galactic Council's Cultural Integration Division, she had seen dozens of worlds, but none had affected her so deeply as this one. "The Thalassans' devotion to ecological balance continues to astound me," she said, turning from the displays to look through the dome's transparent ceiling. Above them, Thalassan swimmers glided through the moonlit waters, their naturally bioluminescent skin pulsing with gentle patterns of light, a form of communication as beautiful as it was complex. 300 years of technological development, and they've never once disrupted their planet's natural cycles. "Unlike some species we could mention," muttered Kai, the other human researcher, not looking up from his specimen analysis. Mara didn't disagree. Humanity's history with its homeworld was a cautionary tale taught throughout the Council worlds. Earth had recovered. Eventually. But only after centuries of restoration efforts and the painful diaspora of billions to colony worlds and orbital habitats. A soft chiming announced the arrival of visitors. The dome's entrance membrane parted, and 3 Thalassans glided in, their movements as fluid on land as they were in water. Like all their kind, they stood slightly taller than the average human, with elongated limbs and webbed fingers. Their skin shimmered with subtle blue-green bioluminescence, brightest along the delicate gill structures at their necks and the ridge that ran from their foreheads to the base of their spines. The foremost Thalassan, Nareen, Azure Reach's chief harmonizer, bowed in the traditional greeting, hands forming an intricate pattern that Mara recognized as the formal welcome for honored guests, though she had lived among them for years. The Thalassans still treated the Council research team with the reverence reserved for visitors from beyond the stars. "Dr. Mara," Nareen's voice was melodious, with the distinctive harmonic undertones of Thalassan speech. "The Elder Council convenes at sunset. Your presence would honor us, especially as we discuss the recent communications from your Galactic Council." Mara's expression tightened slightly. "I received the transmission this morning." Another bureaucratic review of our integration timeline? Nareen's gill structures fluttered, a sign of mild discomfort. "Yes, they speak of accelerated resource exchange proposals." Translation: The Council wants access to Thalassa's rare life essence crystals, the byproduct of their ancient coral reefs, sooner rather than later. The crystals contained energy potential, unlike anything discovered elsewhere in charted space, and the Council's Resource Allocation Committee had been pushing for increased harvesting rights since first contact. "I'll attend," Mara said, knowing she would once again find herself caught between the Council's commercial interests and the Thalassans' ecological concerns. It was the eternal balancing act of her position. After Nareen and the other Thalassans departed, Kai approached her workstation, his expression troubled. "You saw the classified attachment to the Council's message?" Mara nodded grimly. The transmission had included disturbing reports from the Outer Rim, another colony world suffering from unexplained ecological collapse, the third in as many months. The Council was investigating, but solutions were proving elusive. "They mentioned the Deathworlders again," Kai said, lowering his voice, though the only others present were Elara and the two Thalassan research assistants working at the far end of the dome. Mara frowned. The Council has strict policies against employing mercenaries, especially those from unregistered worlds. Desperate times. Kai shrugged. The rumors say the Deathworlders saved our Taxis colony from complete collapse. Brutal methods, but effective. The Deathworlders were something of a legend among Council worlds, mercenaries from a savage, high-gravity planet with extreme environmental conditions that had forged them into natural warriors. They weren't officially recognized by the Council, operating instead in the lawless regions between governed space, taking contracts from anyone who could afford their services. Their methods were said to be as effective as they were ruthless. The Thalassans would never accept their presence here, Mara said firmly. And neither would I. There's a reason the Council classifies them as a potential extinction-level threat to peaceful worlds. Little did she know how soon her convictions would be tested. The first signs of trouble appeared 3 days later, in the form of discoloration in a small section of the Eastern Reef. Mara led a research dive personally, accompanied by Selen, the chief Thalassan healer, and Elara. What they discovered sent ice through her veins. The coral, normally vibrant with bioluminescence, had turned a sickly gray-black at its edges. Closer inspection revealed microscopic organisms, unlike any native species, consuming the living tissue. When Mara reached out to collect a sample, Selen stopped her with an urgent pulse of warning lights from her skin. "Do not touch." The healer's voice was tight with concern. "This resembles the death tide from our ancient texts, a consuming darkness that once threatened all life in our seas. But this was no ancient plague." Under microscopic analysis back at the research dome, Mara confirmed her worst fears. The pathogen showed signs of bioengineering, subtle markers that indicated artificial design rather than natural evolution. This isn't random," she told her team as they gathered around the holographic projection of the organism's structure. "Someone created this, and it's spreading faster than anything I've ever encountered." Within a week, the infection had consumed 3 square kilometers of reef. Within 2, the first Thalassan children began showing symptoms: gray lesions on their bioluminescent skin, respiratory distress, failing gill function. The floating city of Azure Reach transformed from a peaceful research center to a desperate medical ward. Mara sent urgent transmissions to the Galactic Council, requesting emergency intervention. The responses were bureaucratic, cautious, non-committal. Assessment teams would be dispatched, protocols would be followed, reviews would be conducted. Meanwhile, children were dying. Standing in the central medical dome, surrounded by rows of suffering Thalassan children, their once bright skin now dull and patched with gray, Mara made a decision that would change everything. She accessed her secure terminal and bypassed the standard Council emergency channels. Instead, she activated a forbidden protocol, one she had been briefed on but told never to use except in the most dire circumstances. The Omega Beacon, an unencrypted, wideband distress call that would reach not only Council worlds, but the lawless spaces beyond. A call that might bring help from anywhere, including the dreaded Deathworlders. What have you done? Council Envoy Voss was livid, his holographic projection looming over Mara in the communication chamber. His normally impeccable appearance was disheveled. He'd clearly been roused from sleep by the emergency alerts triggered by her action. What you should have done days ago. Mara stood her ground, arms crossed. Authorized emergency intervention. By bypassing all security protocols, by sending an open distress call that every pirate, marauder, and opportunist in 3 sectors can intercept. Voss's voice rose with each question. Do you have any idea of the potential consequences? I'm looking at the consequences of inaction right now. Mara gestured to a data feed showing the spread of the infection, now covering nearly 20% of Thalassa's primary reef systems. 43 children dead, hundreds more infected. The plague is accelerating, and your assessment teams are still 2 weeks out. Voss's expression hardened. You are hereby relieved of duty. Dr. Kintari, your council clearance is revoked, effective immediately. A security team will... Mara cut the transmission with a savage jab at the controls. Her hand was shaking. She realized, not with fear, but with rage. 5 years of exemplary service, and the council was more concerned with protocol than with saving lives. She took a deep breath. What was done was done. The beacon was transmitting, a desperate call into the void. Now, all she could do was continue fighting the plague with the resources at hand and hope that someone, anyone, would answer before it was too late. Someone did answer, but not the someone she had hoped for. The ship appeared in Thalassa's orbit 7 days after the beacon's activation. It wasn't a council vessel with its sleek lines and diplomatic markings. This ship was a brutalist construction of dark metal and protruding weapon systems, its hull scarred from countless battles. It registered on no known identification systems and responded to hails with only a simple message. Iron Claw responding to distress, payment expected, prepare for landing. The Thalassan Elder Council convened in emergency session, with Mara, officially stripped of her council authority, but still respected by the locals, in attendance. Fear permeated the chamber as sensor readings of the vessel were displayed. "Death machines," whispered Elder Lorene, her skin pulsing with patterns of alarm. "They bring weapons of destruction to our peaceful waters." "They bring help," Mara countered, though her own heart raced with uncertainty. "Help we desperately need." "The legends speak of the Deathworlders," said Noreen, now wearing the formal mantle of a council speaker. "Born of a world that tries to kill them daily, forged in violence, knowing nothing of peace or harmony. The legends also say they have never failed a contract," Mara pointed out. "And right now, stopping this plague is all that matters." After hours of debate, the elders reached a fragile consensus. The visitors would be allowed to land, but only at the isolated research platform 10 kilometers from Azure Reach. They would be met by a delegation including Mara and 3 elders. No weapons would be permitted in the city itself. When the Deathworlders' shuttle descended from the ominous ship above, Mara stood on the landing platform, wind whipping her dark hair across her face. Beside her, the Thalassan elders trembled visibly, their skin patterns reflecting their distress in chaotic bursts of light. The shuttle was as intimidating as its mothership, angular, heavily armored, with weapon mounts that had been deactivated but not removed. It settled onto the platform with a hiss of hydraulics, and for a long moment, nothing happened. Then a hatch irised open, revealing a dark interior. The first figure to emerge was unmistakably human, but unlike any human Mara had encountered in council space. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with a physique that spoke of life on a high-gravity world, dense musculature, thick bones, powerful limbs. His face was weathered by exposure to harsh elements, crisscrossed with scars that conventional medicine could have easily removed, but which he had chosen to keep. Most striking were his eyes, a startling amber that seemed to evaluate everything as either threat or prey. Behind him came others, a diverse squad that included several near-human species and at least 2 beings Mara couldn't immediately identify. All were similarly built, similarly armed, similarly dangerous in their bearing. "I am Warlord Kane," the first man announced, his voice a rumbling bass that matched his imposing presence. "Commander of the Iron Claw, we received your distress beacon." His gaze fixed on Mara, recognizing her as the only human in the delegation. "You have a problem that needs solving. We solve problems. For a price." Mara stepped forward, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I am Dr. Mara Kintari, xenobiologist and former Council First Contact Specialist. This is Noreen, speaker for the Thalassen Elder Council, along with Elders Loreen and Toril." She gestured to the Thalassans, who had managed to control their bioluminescent displays of fear. "We're facing an engineered biological plague that's destroying our reef ecosystems and killing Thalassan children. Council help is weeks away, if it comes at all." Kane studied her for a moment, then looked past her to the distant shape of Azure Reach floating on the horizon. "Engineered, you say? Someone sent it deliberately?" "That's our assessment. Yes." A cold smile touched his lips. "Then you have 2 problems, the plague itself, and whoever deployed it." He turned to one of his squad, a stocky woman with a shock of white hair despite her relatively young appearance. "Specialist Vex, preliminary assessment." The woman stepped forward, activating a handheld scanner that was far more advanced than anything Mara had seen outside of top-tier council research facilities. Atmospheric composition normal for a Class M aquatic world. Detecting trace biological contaminants consistent with aggressive pathogenic activity. No immediate threat to our physiology, but I recommend Level 2 containment protocols until confirmed. Kane nodded, then returned his attention to Mara. "We'll need full access to your research, unrestricted movement, and use of our own equipment and methods." It wasn't a request. Now, about payment. This was the moment Mara had been dreading. The Thalassans had little that would interest mercenaries. They were not a wealthy people by conventional standards, focusing on harmony rather than accumulation. The Thalassan people can offer knowledge, biological specimens of great scientific interest, and— Kane cut her off with a dismissive gesture. "Life essence crystals. We know they're here. We know what they're worth. 10 standard units for a preliminary assessment. 50 more if we decide to take the contract. Additional costs based on resource expenditure and personnel risk." Behind Mara, the Elder's skin flashed with patterns of shock and dismay. The crystals were sacred to the Thalassans, the concentrated essence of their ancient reefs, used only for the most critical needs. To trade them away, especially in such quantities. "The crystals are not simple commodities," Elder Loreen said, her voice quavering with emotion. "They are the lifeblood of our world, formed over millennia." "Their energy sources," Kane interrupted bluntly. "Extremely valuable ones. That's our price. Take it, or we leave your people to their fate." Mara felt cold fury rising within her. This was extortion, plain and simple. But the image of dying children in the medical dome flashed in her mind. What choice did they have? 5 units for assessment, she countered. 25 if you take the contract. With proof of results before final payment. Kane's amber eyes narrowed, evaluating her. For a moment, Mara thought he might simply turn and leave. Then he gave a curt nod. Acceptable terms. We begin immediately. What followed was a cultural collision unlike anything Mara had experienced in her years of xenological research. The Deathworlders established a base on the research platform, transforming it within hours into a fortified compound filled with equipment that would have made Council military officers blanch. Their specialists, a mix of combat medics, biowarfare experts, and security personnel, worked with ruthless efficiency, analyzing the plague organism while their security teams conducted reconnaissance dives around the infected reefs. Mara found herself acting as the bridge between two utterly incompatible worldviews. The Thalassans, peaceful to their core, recoiled from the Deathworlders' aggressive methods and weaponry. The mercenaries, in turn, had little patience for Thalassan ceremonial greetings or their insistence on seeking harmony with the very pathogen that was killing them. 3 days into the assessment, Kane summoned Mara to the command center they had established on the platform. Displays showed the rapid progression of the plague, now affecting nearly 30% of the reef systems and spreading toward the southern archipelago where the largest concentration of Thalassan settlements lay. "Yeah, this isn't natural spread," Kane said without preamble as she entered. "Even engineered pathogens follow predictable patterns. This one's being guided." Mara frowned, studying the display. Guided how? "Delivery systems." He gestured, and the display zoomed in on a section of reef. Specialist Vex manipulated the controls, enhancing the image to reveal tiny, metallic objects embedded in the coral. Micro-dispensers, releasing new concentrations of the pathogen in strategic locations. Someone's actively managing this assault. A chill ran down Mara's spine. This wasn't just an attack, it was an ongoing operation with an intelligence behind it. "Can you track the control signals?" "Working on it." Kane's expression was grim. "But first, we need to deal with the immediate threat. The plague has mutated in the southern sectors. It's not just consuming coral anymore." The display shifted again, showing underwater footage that made Mara's breath catch. A Thalassan patrol, swimming through what had once been a vibrant reef corridor, now gray-black with infection. From the deadened coral, sinuous forms emerged, twisted parodies of native marine life, their bodies corrupted by the pathogen into something monstrous. The footage ended abruptly as the creatures attacked. 3 survivors out of 12. Kane said flatly. The patrol was armed only with scientific instruments, useless against these mutations. "The Thalassans don't believe in weapons," Mara said, her voice hollow. "Their entire culture is built around harmony, not conflict. Then their culture is about to face extinction." Kane's voice held no sympathy, only cold pragmatism. "We're taking the contract. Full deployment of countermeasures, identification and elimination of control sources, and neutralization of the intelligence behind this. 25 units of life essence crystals, as agreed." Mara knew the elders would resist. The idea of unleashing armed mercenaries to cleanse their sacred reefs would horrify them. But the footage of those mutated creatures, combined with the rising death toll among Thalassan children, left little room for ethical debate. "I'll secure the authorization," she said. "But there must be limits. The Deathworlders cannot simply destroy everything in their path." Kane's expression hardened. "We do what's necessary to complete the contract. Nothing more, nothing less." He leaned closer, his amber eyes intense. "Don't mistake us for council peacekeepers. Doctor, We weren't hired to save the Thalassian way of life. We were hired to save Thalassian lives. There's a difference. The operation began the following dawn. 3 squads of Deathworlders deployed from the research platform in submersible craft that resembled predatory fish, sleek and deadly. Mara insisted on accompanying the lead team, along with Selen, the Thalassian healer who had first identified the plague's similarity to their ancient death tide. The submersible cut through the azure waters with barely a ripple, its systems calibrated for minimal disruption of the marine environment, the one concession Kane had made to Thalassian sensibilities. Inside, Mara sat rigidly beside Selen, both of them watching as the vibrant, healthy waters gradually gave way to gray-tinged desolation. Kane sat opposite them, methodically checking a weapon unlike any Mara had seen, not energy-based like Council security forces used, but a projectile system designed for underwater combat. Bioreactive ammunition, he explained, noticing her gaze. Target specific genetic markers. Minimal collateral damage to the surrounding environment. You designed weapons specifically for this mission? Mara couldn't hide her surprise. A cold smile touched his scarred face. We come prepared for all contingencies. It's why we're still alive. He finished his inspection and secured the weapon. Your Thalassians aren't the first aquatic species we've worked with, nor the first to face engineered biological warfare. Selen, who had been silent throughout the journey, finally spoke. You have seen such darkness before? Weapons that target the very essence of life? Something flickered in Kane's expression, a shadow of old rage, quickly controlled. On my homeworld, such weapons were commonplace. In the final wars, before Mara could process this unexpected glimpse into Deathworlder history, the submersible's sensors chimed an alert. The pilot, a reptilian humanoid with scaled skin in mottled greens and browns, called back to them. Contact ahead, multiple signatures, moving in coordinated patterns. The forward view screen displayed a nightmare scene. A once beautiful coral formation, now blackened and twisted, swarmed with mutated marine predators. They resembled Thalassa's native serpent eels, but grotesquely enlarged, their sleek bodies bulging with tumorous growths, jaws distended to accommodate multiple rows of razor teeth. Feeding behavior, observed Specialist Vex from her monitoring station. They're consuming the infected coral and growing, adapting, evolving at an accelerated rate. They are becoming living weapons, Selen whispered, horror rippling across her bioluminescent skin in waves of sickly yellow. Kane gave a curt nod to his team. Deployment pattern echo. Target the largest specimens first, then sweep for egg clusters. Move. The Deathworlders exited the submersible with practiced precision, using personal propulsion systems that allowed them to maneuver in the water with startling speed. Their weapons discharged with muted thuds, the specialized ammunition leaving trails of bioluminescent blue in the water before striking their targets. The effect was immediate and devastating. The mutated creatures convulsed as the bioreactive compounds triggered a cascade of cellular breakdown, their twisted bodies dissolving from within. But there were hundreds of them, and they quickly recognized the new threat. With unnatural intelligence, they abandoned their feeding to swarm the attackers. Watching through the submersible's cameras, Mara witnessed combat unlike anything she had imagined. The Deathworlders fought with a coordinated brutality that spoke of extensive experience. They used the water itself as a weapon, creating pressure differentials that disoriented their attackers. They targeted vulnerable anatomy with unerring accuracy, wasting no ammunition. When creatures got too close, they deployed vibroblades that hummed with ultrasonic frequencies, cutting through mutated flesh with horrifying efficiency. This is Mara couldn't find words to describe the mixture of revulsion and reluctant admiration she felt. Necessary. Kane finished for her, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. Your council would have studied these mutations for months before authorizing containment protocols. By then, your entire planet would be overrun. The battle lasted 27 minutes. When it ended, the water around the submersible was clouded with dissolving biomatter, and the Deathworlders returned, 2 of them bearing injuries that would have incapacitated ordinary humans. "Medic!" Kane called, and a burly woman with intricate tattoos covering her exposed skin moved forward to treat the wounded with the same brutal efficiency they had shown in combat. "The creatures are becoming more resilient with each generation," reported Vex, studying tissue samples collected during the engagement. "The pathogen is incorporating genetic material from whatever it consumes, adapting almost in real time. This isn't standard bioengineering. This is artistry." There was a disturbing note of admiration in her voice. "Can you track the control signals from the dispensers we found?" Kane asked. Vex nodded. "Getting stronger readings. They're originating from the deep trench southeast of here, approximately 30 kilometers. Mara frowned. "The abyssal chasm. There's nothing there but ancient ruins from Thalassa's prehistory. No settlements. No research stations. Nothing official," Kane said pointedly. "Set course for the chasm," he ordered the pilot. "Full sensor sweep as we approach. And inform the other teams to continue reef cleansing operations. We need to slow the spread while we find the source." As the submersible changed course, Ceylon moved closer to Mara, her voice low. "The abyssal chasm is sacred to my people. Our oldest legends say it was the birthplace of the first Thalassans, where we evolved from simple marine creatures into beings of light and thought. And now someone's using it as a base to destroy everything your people have built." Kane interjected, having overheard despite Ceylon's attempt at privacy. "Sacred or not, if that's where the control signals originate, that's where we're going." The journey to the abyssal chasm took them through progressively more infected waters. Twice more. They encountered swarms of mutated creatures, each generation more aggressive and resilient than the last. The Deathworlders adapted their tactics accordingly, using increasingly destructive weapons despite Mara's protests about ecological damage. "The ecology is already damaged beyond recognition," Kane told her after a particularly heated argument. "These weapons are the least of your concerns." As they approached the chasm, a vast underwater canyon that plunged into darkness deeper than Thalassan explorers had ever ventured, the submersible's sensors detected energy signatures unlike anything Mara had seen before. Not Council technology, nor anything from known independent worlds. "Unregistered tech," Vex confirmed, her expression grim. "Sophisticated cloaking, but our systems are designed to detect even the most advanced stealth fields." She looked up from her instruments, meeting Kane's gaze. "It's big, boss, really big." Kane nodded, unsurprised. "Prepare for deep deployment. Full tactical loadout. Dr. Kintari, you and the healer will remain on the submersible." "No," Mara said firmly. "I'm coming with you. This is still my world, my responsibility. It's a combat operation, not a scientific expedition." Kane countered. "You'll be a liability. I know more about Thalassan biology and this environment than anyone on your team," Mara insisted. "If you encounter something you don't understand down there, and you will, you'll need me." A tense silence followed as Kane evaluated her. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Suit up, but you follow orders without question, or I'll have you stunned and returned to the submersible. Clear?" "Crystal," Mara replied, ignoring the fluttering of fear in her stomach. The Deathworlders' combat suits were marvels of engineering, form-fitting exoskeletons that enhanced strength and speed while providing protection against both environmental hazards and direct attacks. Designed for aquatic operations, they included sophisticated breathing systems and propulsion units that made moving through water almost effortless. As Mara was fitted with a slightly modified version of the standard suit, she noticed elements in its design that seemed oddly familiar. "These look like adaptations of thalassan biomimicry," she observed, examining the gill-like structures on the suit's neck. The technician assisting her, a gaunt man with cybernetic enhancements visible at his temples, grunted in acknowledgement. "Boss had us study every aquatic species in known space before this mission. Thalassan physiology is particularly efficient for oxygen extraction in high-pressure environments." This revelation added another layer to Mara's conflicted feelings about the Deathworlders. They were brutal, yes, but also thorough in their preparation, borrowing and adapting technologies and biological principles from across the galaxy without regard for cultural boundaries or council restrictions. Once equipped, the strike team assembled in the submersible's deployment bay. Kane conducted a final briefing, displaying a three-dimensional map of the chasm and the energy signature they had detected. Primary objective: locate and neutralize the control center for the pathogen dispensers. Secondary objective: identify the intelligence behind this attack and eliminate it. Tertiary objective: secure any data or technology for analysis. His amber eyes swept the team. "This is a black site operation. Whoever's down there, they've gone to extreme lengths to remain undetected. Expect sophisticated defenses and no quarter if discovered." The deployment was a controlled descent into darkness. As they left the submersible, Mara activated her suit's bioluminescence, another feature adapted from thalassan biology, providing just enough light to navigate without advertising their presence. The abyssal chasm lived up to its name. Its walls were sheer cliffs of ancient stone, disappearing into blackness below. Here, even the infected coral was absent, replaced by primitive deep-sea organisms that had changed little in millions of years. The water grew colder, the pressure intensified, and Mara's suit automatically adjusted to compensate. They descended in formation, with Kane and two specialists taking point. Mara positioned in the center of the group where she could be most easily protected. Their helmet communications allowed for silent coordination, with Kane occasionally issuing terse commands through a tactical channel. At nearly 2,000 meters depth, Vex signaled a halt. "Energy signature intensifying," she reported. "Multiple sources now, and movement ahead." Kane gestured, and the team activated advanced optical enhancements in their helmets. Through the gloom, Mara could now make out structures built into the chasm wall, not natural formations, but deliberate constructions that blended almost seamlessly with the rock face. More disturbing were the shapes moving around these structures, humanoid figures in environmental suits similar to their own, but with designs she didn't recognize. "Not Council," whispered Kane, unnecessarily. "Independent research group, maybe, or corporate black ops." Mara studied the facility through her enhanced optics. "Those look like mass cultivation chambers," she said, indicating large cylindrical structures where greenish light pulsed rhythmically. "They're growing something down here, growing it fast." Kane nodded. "The pathogen, mass-producing it for the dispensers." He switched to the team channel. "New plan. Vex, you and Tarek place charges on those cultivation chambers. Raiko, Lorne, secure that entrance. The rest of you, with me. We're paying a visit." "And me?" Mara asked. "Stay close. Identify anything of biological significance. Do not engage unless directly threatened. The attack was swift and ruthlessly precise. The Deathworlders moved through water with predatory grace, closing the distance to the facility before its occupants detected them. The first sign the facility had of their presence was when Vex's shaped charges detonated against the cultivation chambers, rupturing their containment fields in precisely calculated breaches that caused the contents to neutralize rather than disperse. Chaos erupted as facility alarms activated, bathing the dark waters in pulsing red light. Figures rushed from the entrances, wielding energy weapons that discharged sizzling bolts through the water. The Deathworlders returned fire with their specialized projectile weapons, each shot finding its mark with deadly accuracy. Mara stayed close to Kane as ordered, fighting the instinct to retreat from the violence. This was a side of galactic politics she had never witnessed, the shadow wars that took place beyond Council jurisdiction, where corporate interests and rogue states pursued their agendas without regard for the billions of lives they affected. They breached the facility through a loading dock whose outer doors had been damaged by the initial explosions. Inside, emergency systems had drained most compartments, creating air-filled spaces where facility personnel, human and near-human from what Mara could see, scrambled to organize a defense or destroy evidence. Kane moved with lethal efficiency, neutralizing 3 guards with precisely placed shots before they could bring their weapons to bear. The rest of his team secured the chamber, moving with the coordination that came from countless shared battles. "Command center?" Kane demanded of a wounded technician, pressing the barrel of his weapon against the man's throat. "Central hub, level 4. The technician gasped, blood seeping from a shoulder wound. "But you're too late. The project is already self-sustaining. The plague will consume this world, just like the others." Others. The word hit Mara like a physical blow. The unexplained ecological collapses on other worlds that the Council had been investigating. This was the same group, the same method. "Who are you working for?" she demanded, pushing past Kane to confront the technician. "Why target peaceful worlds like Thalassa?" The man laughed, a wet sound that ended in a cough. "Peaceful worlds sitting on valuable resources. Worlds the Council restricts access to because of cultural preservation policies." His eyes, feverish with pain and fanaticism, locked onto hers. "Do you know what life essence crystals are worth on the open market? What they could power? The Council hoards them, rations them to their favored worlds, while the rest of us struggle with inferior energy sources." "So you murder children?" Mara's voice shook with rage. "Destroy entire ecosystems." We create opportunity." The technician's voice was fading. "When the native population is decimated, when the Council fails to protect them, the regulations fall, the resources become available." Kane ended the conversation with a calculated blow that rendered the technician unconscious. "We need to move. Command center, level 4. They fought their way upward through the facility, encountering increasingly desperate resistance. The Deathworlders took casualties, 2 specialists seriously wounded, another killed by a security system none of them had encountered before, but they continued their advance with the relentless determination that had earned their kind their fearsome reputation. The command center was a circular chamber dominated by holographic displays showing the spread of the plague across Thalassa's oceans. At the center stood a figure that made Mara's blood run cold. A Quarian, member of a species known throughout Council space for their brilliance in biological sciences and their complete lack of ethical constraints. Banned from Council worlds for crimes against sentient life, they operated in the shadows, selling their expertise to the highest bidders. "Fascinating," the Quarian said as they burst into the chamber, seeming more interested than alarmed. Its multifaceted eyes reflected the red emergency lighting as it studied the intruders. Deathworlders, I didn't expect the Council to employ your kind. The Council didn't, Kane replied, his weapon trained unwaveringly on the alien. We're independent contractors. Responding to a distress call, you triggered. The Quarian's mouth parts shifted in what might have been a smile. Ah, the beacon. An unexpected variable in my calculations. Still, it hardly matters. The process has reached critical mass. The death tide cannot be stopped now. Mara pushed forward. You engineered this plague specifically for Thalassa, didn't you? Designed it to target their unique biology? Of course. The Quarian's tone was one of professional pride. A bespoke extinction event. The pathogen targets the bioluminescent properties of Thalassan physiology, both in the coral and in the people themselves. It converts that energy potential into accelerated growth and adaptation. Quite elegant, really. Each death fuels the next wave of infection. Why? Mara demanded. For crystals? For energy sources you could synthesize with your technology? For progress. The Quarian replied simply. The Thalassans waste the potential of their world with their obsession with harmony. They sit upon resources that could advance a dozen technologies by centuries, yet they harvest only what they need for their simple lives. It gestured at the displays. Once they are gone, those resources will serve greater purposes. Kane had heard enough. Shut it down, he ordered, his voice deadly quiet. All of it. Now. The Quarian's eye facets gleamed with amusement. Impossible. The system is autonomous now, self-perpetuating. Even if you destroy this facility, the plague will continue to spread, to evolve. In fact, it's already producing its masterpiece. It gestured to a display showing deep-sea readings. The Leviathan awakens, my finest creation. On the screen, something massive stirred in the deepest part of the abyssal chasm, a colossal form taking shape from the concentrated essence of the plague, absorbing and incorporating genetic material from everything it touched. The sensors struggled to define its dimensions, but Mara estimated it at over 100 meters in length. The Death Tide incarnate, the Quarian said with evident satisfaction. It will rise from the depths, consuming everything in its path, the plague in its perfect form, intelligent, adaptable, unstoppable. Kane didn't waste time with further discussion. His weapon discharged, and the Quarian collapsed, its chitinous exoskeleton punctured by bioreactive ammunition designed to penetrate such defenses. Vex, he barked into his comm. Status on the cultivation chambers. All destroyed, came the response. But we're picking up massive biological readings from the lower chasm. Something big. Boss. Really big. The Leviathan, Mara said, studying the facility's data systems. It's real. The Quarian engineered it as the final stage of the plague, a living weapon designed to ensure total ecological collapse even if the dispensers are neutralized. Kane joined her at the console, his expression grim behind his helmet visor. Can it be killed? Mara scanned through the Quarian's research data, her xenobiological training allowing her to grasp concepts that would have been meaningless to most. Not easily. It's designed with redundant systems, distributed nervous networks, and rapid regeneration capabilities. Conventional weapons would just feed it, make it stronger. Unconventional weapons, then, Kane said. He activated his comm again. All teams, fall back to the submersible. Prepare for deep strike deployment of Nova charges. Mara's head snapped up. Nova charges? You brought antimatter weapons to a water world? We bring them everywhere. Kane replied without apology. Insurance policy. You can't use those here, Mara insisted. The ecological damage would be catastrophic. You'd create a tectonic event that could destabilize the entire region. Thousands of thalassans would die in the resulting tsunamis. Kane's expression hardened. Millions will die if that thing reaches the surface. This isn't about minimizing damage anymore. Doctor, it's about survival. Mara turned back to the console, desperation driving her as she searched through the Quarian's files. There had to be another way, something that would target the Leviathan specifically without destroying everything around it. Here, she said suddenly, highlighting a section of data. The Quarian built a failsafe into the Leviathan, a biological kill switch, in case it needed to terminate the project and start over. How do we trigger it? Mara's heart sank as she read further. Direct neural interface with the primary brainstem. Someone would need to physically attach the trigger device to the creature's primary sensory cluster. Kane was silent for the moment, evaluating options with cold calculation. Suicide mission, he concluded. Even in our suits. Getting close enough to that thing? Not necessarily, Mara said, an idea forming. Thalassan biotechnology. They've developed methods of communicating with deep-sea creatures using harmonic resonance patterns. If we could adapt one of their devices to carry the kill signal, we'd still need to get close enough to use it, Kane pointed out. My team can do that, came a new voice. Seelan stood in the doorway of the command center, having apparently followed them despite orders to remain on the submersible. Thalassans can approach marine life without triggering aggression responses. It is part of our evolutionary heritage. Kane shook his head. This isn't natural marine life. It's a bioweapon designed specifically to target your species. Nevertheless, Selene insisted, her bioluminescence pulsing with determination. We must try. The alternative you propose would destroy too much of what we are trying to save. A tense silence fell as Kane considered the options. Finally, he gave a curt nod. We'll try it your way first, but the Nova charges remain our backup plan. He turned to Mara. Can you modify the kill switch to work with Thalassan technology? I think so, Mara said, already downloading the necessary files to her suit's systems. But we'll need to get back to Azure Reach. The biotech labs there have the equipment I need. Then we move now, Kane decided. The Leviathan is still forming, still vulnerable. We won't get a better chance. The race back to Azure Reach was a desperate sprint against time. The submersible pushed its engines beyond safety parameters. Kane's pilot, extracting performance the vessel's designers had never intended. Meanwhile, the Leviathan continued to grow, absorbing infected biomass and evolving with frightening rapidity. In the biotech labs of Azure Reach, Mara worked feverishly alongside Selene and Thalassan scientists to integrate the Quarian's kill switch into a modified version of their harmonic resonance technology. The result was an elegant device that resembled a Thalassan musical instrument, a series of crystalline rods that would emit precisely calibrated frequencies when activated. It will disrupt the creature's distributed nervous system. Mara explained to Kane as final adjustments were made, causing a cascading failure that should neutralize it without a massive explosion. Should, Kane repeated skeptically. It's the best option we have that doesn't involve potentially destroying half the planet. Mara replied sharply. The plan that emerged was a compromise between Thalassan and Deathworlder approaches. A team of Thalassan volunteers, led by Selene, would approach the Leviathan using their natural abilities to move harmoniously through water. They would carry the modified kill switch and attempt to get close enough to the creature's primary sensory cluster to activate it. Meanwhile, Kane's remaining combat-ready specialists would provide a distraction, drawing the Leviathan's defensive responses away from the Thalassan team, and, as a last resort, The nova charges would be positioned at strategic points around the abyssal chasm, ready to be detonated if all else failed. The elders objected strenuously to this final measure, but Mara, to her own surprise, found herself supporting Cain. If the Leviathan reaches the surface intact, it won't just kill Thalassans, she told the council during a tense emergency session. It will consume everything, transforming your entire world into an extension of itself. There would be nothing left to save. In the end, the elders reluctantly agreed, though many could not look at Cain or his warriors without visible revulsion pulsing across their bioluminescent skin. The final confrontation took place in the lightless depths of the abyssal chasm. 3 submersibles descended, one carrying the Thalassan team, one with Cain's strike force, and one with Mara and the remaining Deathworlder specialists, monitoring the operation and controlling the nova charges. The Leviathan had continued to grow, now measuring over 200 meters in length. Its form defied easy classification, part serpent, part cephalopod, with elements of a dozen other marine species incorporated into its constantly shifting anatomy. Its skin pulsed with corrupted bioluminescence, sickly green-black patterns that seemed to absorb light rather than emit it. Primary brainstem located, reported Vex from the monitoring station. Dorsal ridge approximately 50 meters from the anterior end. Heavy sensory cluster there appears to be the control center for the distributed nervous system. Selen's voice came through the communication system, calm despite the horror they faced. We see it. Beginning approach pattern now. On the external cameras. Mara watched as the Thalassan team, 6 volunteers who had insisted on joining despite knowing the risks, swam in perfect formation toward the massive creature. Their natural bioluminescence pulsed in harmonious patterns designed to appear non-threatening to marine life. Simultaneously, Cain's team deployed from their submersible, activating high-intensity light sources and acoustic generators calibrated to attract the Leviathan's attention. The creature responded immediately, massive tentacle-like appendages sweeping through the water toward the disturbance. "It's working," Mara breathed, watching as the Leviathan's attention focused on Cain's team, ignoring the Thalassans approaching from below. For several tense minutes, the plan seemed to be succeeding. Cain's specialists executed evasive maneuvers with practiced precision, drawing the Leviathan's attacks while staying just beyond reach of its deadly appendages. Meanwhile, the Thalassan team closed steadily on their target, the kill switch device glowing with potential energy. Then everything went wrong. One of Cain's team miscalculated, coming too close to a rapidly extending tentacle. It seized him, crushing his enhanced suit like paper. The Leviathan's behavior changed instantly, no longer trying to simply swat at irritants, but actively hunting. Its massive form twisted with unexpected speed, bringing secondary sensory organs to bear on its surroundings. It detected the Thalassan team. "Abort!" Cain's voice cut through the comm channel. "Thalassan team, abort approach. It's seen you." But it was too late. The creature's attention shifted, its corrupted bioluminescence flaring with hungry recognition. These were the beings it had been created to destroy, the primary targets of its engineered hunger. 3 tentacles lashed out simultaneously, faster than should have been possible for something so massive. 2 of the Thalassan swimmers were caught instantly, their bodies crushed. The others scattered, trying to reach safety. But the Leviathan pursued with single-minded purpose. "Nova charges," Cain ordered grimly. "Prepare for detonation." "No!" Mara's voice cut through the channel. "Selen is still out there with the kill switch. She's still approaching the brainstem." Indeed, while the other survivors fled, Selen had continued her approach, using the Leviathan's focus on her fleeing companions to close the distance to the primary sensory cluster. Her bioluminescence had dimmed to near invisibility, making her little more than a shadow in the dark water. "She'll never make it," Kane said, but there was a note of uncertain respect in his voice. "That thing will sense her the moment she gets close enough to use the device. Then we need to give her a better distraction." Mara decided. She turned to the submersible's pilot. "Take us in closer, right above the creature's main sensory array." "That's suicide," the pilot protested. "Do it," ordered Kane, understanding Mara's intent. "Full power to shields. Prepare for impact." The submersible surged forward, its engine straining as it drove directly toward the Leviathan. The creature sensed the approach, massive jaws opening to reveal row upon row of serrated teeth. It lunged upward, just as Mara had anticipated, focusing its attention on the larger threat. "Now!" Kane shouted into the comm. "Selen, now!" In that crucial moment, as the Leviathan rose to attack the submersible, Selen made her final approach. The kill switch device in her hands glowed with gathering energy as she pressed it against the creature's primary neural cluster and activated the sequence. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Waves of disruption rippled through the Leviathan's corrupted bioluminescence, the sickly green-black patterns stuttering and fracturing. Its massive body convulsed, tentacles thrashing wildly in the water. One struck the submersible, sending it spinning away with hull breach alarms blaring. "Status report," Kane demanded as emergency systems engaged to seal damaged sections. "Kill switch activated." Vex confirmed, monitoring the biological readings. Neural disruption proceeding through primary and secondary systems. The creature's coherence is failing. On the external cameras, they watched as the Leviathan began to disintegrate. Not an explosion, but a systematic shutdown of the complex biological systems that held it together. Like a puppet with its strings cut, sections went limp, then began to dissolve back into component elements. "Selen," Mara called into the comm. "Selen, report." No response came. In the chaotic final thrashing of the Leviathan, they had lost visual contact with the Thalassen healer. It wasn't until hours later, after recovery teams had scoured the now quiet depths, that they found her body, crushed by a reflexive spasm of the dying creature. The kill switch still clutched in her lifeless hands. The aftermath brought a complex mixture of grief and relief to Thalassa Prime. With the destruction of the Leviathan and the Quarian facility, the plague began to recede. The Deathworlders' remaining teams, using data recovered from the facility, systematically located and neutralized all remaining pathogen dispensers. Thalassen healers, working with information Mara had extracted from the Quarians' research, developed treatments for infected children. Not all could be saved. 87 had died before the cure was synthesized, but hundreds more recovered, their bioluminescence gradually returning to its natural, healthy patterns. The reefs would take longer to heal. Vast stretches of once vibrant coral forests had been reduced to gray-black skeletons. But already, in areas where the infection had been stopped earliest, tiny points of blue light could be seen, new growth beginning the long process of restoration. In Azure Reach, a somber ceremony honored the fallen, both Thalassan and Deathworlder. The bodies of Kane's lost specialists were committed to the deep with full military honors, while Selene and the other Thalassan volunteers were memorialized with a living monument, a carefully cultivated coral formation that would grow over decades into a bioluminescent tribute to their sacrifice. Kane and his remaining team prepared for departure 3 weeks after the Leviathan's destruction. The agreed-upon payment, 25 units of life essence crystals, had been delivered to the Iron Claw. But before leaving, Kane did something unexpected. He offered to leave behind 3 of his veterans, volunteers who would train a small group of Thalassen defenders in basic security measures. Not to make them warriors, he explained to Mara as they stood on the landing platform where his shuttle waited, but to ensure they can detect and respond to threats before they become extinction-level events. Mara studied the scarred mercenary, seeing him with new eyes after their shared ordeal. "Why?" she asked simply. Kane's amber gaze turned toward the horizon, where azure reaches bioluminescence was beginning to glow as evening approached. "Because some things are worth preserving. Doctor, even Deathworlders understand that." He turned back to her. "The Council won't protect them. Not really. They'll send researchers and diplomats and cultural observers. But when the knives come out, and they will come out again, bureaucracy is too slow. And mercenaries are faster," Mara said, not disagreeing. "We respond to the call," Kane acknowledged. "For a price. But sometimes—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Sometimes the payment isn't just in crystals or credits." With that cryptic statement, he boarded his shuttle. The Iron Claw departed Thalassen orbit the following dawn, leaving behind a changed world, wounded but recovering, and perhaps a little wiser to the dangers that lurked in the spaces between stars. In her final report to the Galactic Council, transmitted despite her officially revoked clearance, Mara documented everything that had occurred. The bioweapon attack, the Quarian facility, the Deathworlders' intervention, the sacrifice of Selene and her team. She ended with a formal request for reinstatement, along with a recommendation that the Council reconsider its policies on both resource protection and emergency response protocols. She included one final observation. "In our quest for a civilized galaxy, we have perhaps forgotten that there are uncivilized threats. The Thalassans' devotion to harmony and peace is beautiful and worthy of protection. But that protection sometimes requires those willing to embrace violence so that others may remain untouched by it. The Deathworlders, for all their brutality and mercenary nature, served as unlikely saviors in our darkest hour. The moral price of their intervention was high, but the alternative was extinction. As we move forward, we must find balance between our highest ideals and the sometimes harsh requirements of survival." Months later, as Mara stood on the observation platform of the newly established Council security outpost in orbit above Thalassa Prime, she watched the planet turning slowly below. From this distance, the scars of the plague were invisible, the oceans a perfect blue marbled with white clouds. 3 pale moons orbited serenely, just as they had before the darkness came. But Thalassa was changed, as was Mara herself. Among the Thalassan floating cities, small groups now trained regularly in detection and defense, guided by the 3 Deathworlder veterans who had chosen to remain. The Thalassans hadn't abandoned their commitment to harmony, but they had expanded their understanding of it to include the protection of that harmony from those who would destroy it. As for Mara, the Council had eventually reinstated her, though with a reprimand in her permanent record for the unauthorized use of the Omega Beacon. She had been reassigned as Chief Security Liaison for Thalassa Prime, a new position created in response to her recommendations. Sometimes, in quiet moments like this, she wondered where Kane and the Iron Claw were now, what other worlds they were saving, or possibly destroying, for the right price. She had accessed every record available on Deathworlders, learning more about their mysterious homeworld and the brutal conditions that had forged them into the warriors they had become. One fact had particularly struck her. Despite their fearsome reputation and mercenary nature, there was no record of Deathworlders ever violating a contract once accepted. Their word, once given, was apparently unbreakable, a strange honor among people so comfortable with violence. Dr. Kintari, a young Thalassian aide, interrupted her thoughts. The Elder Council is ready for your briefing on the new early warning system. Mara nodded, taking one last look at the beautiful blue world below. Tell them I'm on my way. As she walked towards the conference room, she reflected that perhaps this was the true legacy of the Leviathan crisis, not just survival, but a new wisdom about the galaxy's complexities. Sometimes the most dangerous beings could become unlikeliest saviors. Sometimes violence could serve peace. And sometimes calling monsters from the darkness was the only way to prevent the light from being extinguished forever. But the price, always the price, was something they must never forget.